Senate lawmakers holding an important hearing to address the rise of political violence in our country. That included testimony from conservative host Michael Knowles, who back in 2023 was supposed to debate at the University of Pittsburgh, but was met with hundreds of protesters outside campus, burning an effigy of him with a Hitler mustache.
The ranking member suggested that we condemn political violence, which surely we must all do. But then he suggested that we not try to pinpoint exactly which side the violence comes from. The federal government must act now to stop the consistent and accelerating trend of leftist terrorism. For a legislator to deny the threat and neglect the remedy might once have been chalked up to ignorance. Today, it is nothing less than complicity.
Joining me now is the host of the Michael Knowles Show, Michael Knowles. Michael, and at that Pittsburgh event, as you well know, an Antifa terror couple dropped 2 homemade incendiary smoke devices into a crowd of people waiting to enter that event. Those individuals were then sentenced to prison time. With that as the backdrop, with that as the evidence, were you able to convince these Democrat senators that far left violence is a threat to our nation?
Well, I wasn't able to do that because half the Democrats didn't even show up. And then 2 additional Democrats showed up briefly to make a point or two and then ran out the door. There was a particular irony in that Senator Cory Booker showed up and he gave this long speech about how we all need introspection and we all need to reconsider some of the things that we've said. And then he bolted before I could respond to it because, of course, Cory Booker today continues to endorse Jay Jones in the Virginia Attorney General race. Jay Jones, who has fantasized about killing Republicans and our kids and accused Republicans of breeding little fascists. We've all seen the text messages. It was hypocrisy of the highest sort from the Democrats. They couldn't deny the statistics any longer because though they have tried to make the claim that political violence is a both sides issue or even that it's a chiefly Republican issue, that isn't true. And what's so bizarre about the statistics is they don't even count the most obvious examples of left-wing organized violence, including that Antifa attack on my campus event that you mentioned just a moment ago.
That was quite a tease to your battle with Spartacus. Let's watch a little bit more of it.
I've never seen the President of the United States who has spoken about punching people in the face, who has said a lot of violent rhetoric, has never given that type of self-interrogation.
Jay Jones has the vision, commitment, and integrity to keep families safe and make sure every Virginian gets a fair shake in the justice system. I'll be working every day to ensure Jay wins this race. That's the endorsement of Senator Booker for a man who would seek to be the Attorney General of Virginia. This is a man who, if people have not been reading the news, has called for a Republican to be murdered, for his children to be murdered. Senator Booker, in this spirit of introspection, is standing by this endorsement. So I suppose I would invite, perhaps I should have looked, because Senator Booker has left the room, and I think I can guess why.
I mean, look, Jay Jones is just the latest example, but time and time again, Michael, we have seen Democrats with an opportunity to call out leftist violence on their side of the political spectrum. And yet they never do. They never take that next step. In fact, many people are still endorsing Jay Jones. And the reason they don't is because they're so fearful of losing elections, even though it would be the right thing to do, because they're scared of losing power. Is that your read, Michael?
Of course, and they obviously don't take the issue of political violence seriously. If they did, most of the Democrats would have shown up to that hearing yesterday. If they did, they disavow Jay Jones. But clearly what they believe is that when the right speaks, that constitutes violence. And when the left commits violence, that constitutes speech.
30% of Americans are saying political violence is necessary to get our country back on track. That number should be 0, but it's actually up from 20% last year. What happens next? I mean, are you confident that at the end of the day, Congress is going to put real laws in place to make sure that violence doesn't happen and also, quite frankly, cut off the financial spigot that in many instances allows it to happen and funds it?
I'm certainly not confident that Democrats in Congress are going to do anything. I'm very grateful to Chairman Eric Schmidt for calling that hearing yesterday. But no, the Democrats have made clear they are not serious about this. And it's very distressing how popular political violence is now, but it is much more popular on the left. People who are very liberal are 8 times as likely to support political violence as people who are very conservative. Young liberals over 4 times, or roughly 4 times as likely as young conservatives. So it's one side of the aisle much more than the other. What is required required is to break down these left-wing organized crime networks, because they are real, despite Democrats trying to deny them. They are using nonprofit tax-exempt organizations. They're meeting in real places. They're committing real attacks. And so law enforcement needs to step in here to restore order. President Trump has already taken steps to do that. But the Democrats are not going to go along with us. They seem to be fine with the political violence status quo.
Host of the Michael Knowles Show, Michael Knowles, thank you. Thank you for your testimony yesterday. Hopefully something changes.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.